You are listening to Practical and Woo by Mindset and Manifest. My name is Eden, and I invite you to embark on a journey with me to explore the practical and spiritual edges of the unknown for the purpose of allowing you to embody and empower yourself uniquely as you are, and to intentionally create and live a life of freedom and fulfillment. Each week, I am going to discuss topics such as energetics, reality creation, manifestation, astrology, tarot, and more to help empower you to live beyond perceived limitations and to practically design your life so it feels like absolute magic every step of the way. Let's dive in. Well, hello, brilliant soul. It's been a minute since we've done a story episode, and today felt like the perfect day for one. An episode that speaks to your mind on all levels and allows you to dive in passively, as if you were reliving your childhood days of sitting down for story time. I don't know about you, but I still love a good story time. Today's story is also a transmission about how your life builds itself through the smallest moments and movements that you make. And it's also building momentum off of the contemplations of last week's episode. We so often imagine that momentum is an avalanche, an energetic surge that comes crashing through our lives in a blaze. And what I'm coming to familiarize myself with is that these kinds of moments appear quietly, often in the smallest shift or the tiniest of decisions. Ultimately, momentum begins where resistance ends. So, let's dive into the story. There was once a woman who lived alone on the edge of town, in a quiet house that backed onto a stretch of open land. She wasn't isolated, but she felt isolated. Her days had become slow, heavy, muted. The weeks behind her felt like a stalled chapter she kept reading, hoping the ending would change if she just stared at it long enough. She wasn't depressed per se, but she felt suspended in time, destined to repeat the same bleak moments over and over again. Held inside her kind of inner winter that stretched long before the season did. She tried to fix herself with plans and strategies, self-lectures. She journaled until the ink ran dry. She plotted the next steps of her life, erased them, plotted them again. And even though her mind was loud, her spirit felt quiet. One morning before the sun had fully risen, she woke with a feeling of a get up and go. It was an inner stirring that caused her to abruptly sit up and move briskly to the edge of her bed, staring blankly and with sleep-encrusted eyes into the pale light that was peering into her room from in between her window's curtains. The world outside was covered in fresh snow. It was untouched, and it felt sacred. She wrapped herself in a coat, pulled on her boots, opened the door. The cold met her like a rite of passage, and her breath rose in small clouds all around her. The yard stretched out before her, blanketed in a white that was so smooth it looked like a new page. The woman stood still for a few moments, listening intently to the quiet. And then she felt it, the impulse to crouch down and gather a handful of snow. It clung together instantly, fragile but willing. She shaped it lightly between her palms, forming a small, imperfect sphere that she soon after placed on the ground and gently started nudging forward in her yard. Her snowball gathered new layers, becoming something more than it had been seconds earlier. She nudged it again. The second roll was smoother. There was a third, a fourth. Snow clung to it eagerly as if it had been a willing and eager participant invested in her joy. She stood and brushed her gloves together, noticing how the simple act of rolling this tiny, small, silly, unnecessary ball of snow had loosened something in her chest. There was space where tightness had once been. She crouched again, made another ball, and rolled it with more ease this time, tracing a slow path through the snow until it grew large enough to lift. She stacked it onto the first, and a familiar shape began to form. one that pleasantly reminded her of her childhood, of play, of days before she ever tried to outrun herself. The young woman crafted a final snowball for the snowman's head, added stones for eyes, a smile from a twig, and a red wolf scarf that she had shoved into her pocket weeks ago and had since forgotten about. A snowman stood before her, simple, plain, and somehow in its glory. She thought she was done, but soon felt she wasn't. When she turned to go back inside, her steps slowed, prompting her to stop. She half turned to meet the snowman's carefully crafted gaze and noticed that its silhouette stood alone in a wide field of white. The rest of the yard looked like untouched, endless potential and unclaimed space. Something whispered from deep within her, to begin again. So the young woman placed her hands into the snow and started rolling another ball, not for a snowman this time, for something else that she didn't yet have a name for. The second snowball became a small wall. The wall became a curved structure. The structure became the base of a tower. The young woman packed snow with her gloves, smoothing the edges, creating sharp lines that glistened under luminescent sunlight. The quiet of her yard became her companion as she formed a second tower, a connecting archway, and a set of steps that she carved with the side of her hand. She pressed swirling patterns into the snow, including spirals and vines and other playful symbols. Hours passed, yet she didn't notice the passing of time. It all felt like one single moment, as well as a precious eternity rolled up all in one. Her body warmed from the labor, her breath deepened, her mind found peace. Soon she paused to look around, only to discover that her once expansive yard had been transformed. A snow kingdom emerged from her creative touch, equipped with its towers and walls and arches and sculptures. A snow fox crouched beside the entrance, and a small carved owl perched on the corner of a parapet. An intricate snow throne sat at its center, its surface polished smooth, and it was shimmering gently. The young woman stepped into the corner of her creation as the snow crunched beneath her boots. In that circle of the towers and sculptures, she felt truth rise up in her body. Nothing extraordinary is built by force. Everything extraordinary is built by beginning one step at a time. She had been waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for her fear to disappear. But breakthroughs do not precede motion. They follow it. They gather around the smallest of beginnings. This kingdom, this impossible, accidental, unplanned kingdom, was proof. It had risen from one snowball, one nudge, one moment of saying yes to the smallest invitation of play on a sunny winter day. For the first time in months, the young woman felt truly alive. The kingdom stayed for days, and it drew the attention of neighbors and children. Everyone asked her how she built it. They all assumed she planned it. What they didn't understand was that the kingdom had not been planned, but revealed. For life unfolds to those who begin. And as the temperatures warmed, the kingdom began to softly melt. The towers slouched and edges blurred. And instead of sadness, the young woman felt reverence for the wholeness of her experience. It had somehow, miraculously, returned her to herself. It had somehow shown her that she was capable of building worlds through even the smallest act of participation. When the last tower finally sank into a mound of softened snow, she whispered a thank you to the moment that she had listened to that first small impulse, the invitation to roll a single snowball without demanding a reason why. Until next time.